in a world where I was talented enough to become a writer of books, a composer of music, or a director of movies, wow, that would be awesome. I am not that person, sadly. So to me, finding a connection between what you do and what you love to do is important, because I think lessons are to be learned from everywhere and from the most unexpected sources.
This is Leadership Development Series. Our guest today is Tipu Purkayastha.
And we are live. Yay. Hi, Tipu.
Hey, Anurag. Good to see you.
The first time I met was at Uvas Canyon. You had organized the alumni picnic there. Professor Matt Shooks was there.
You had a jet black beard at that time.
I had like a goatee kind of thing. Yes, you're right.
You had a cap.
Yeah. Matt Shooks really liked that there were some other people with facial hair. Yeah. From there, I realized how you are the pillar of the community. There's almost like an Excel family that exists in the Bay Area because of you and the efforts that you have taken. I saw people who have been here who have graduated from Excel for 30 plus years, who are part of the community. That was amazing for me to see. Then over the years, I saw a different side of you where you are interviewing guys like Anurag Kashyap. Danny Boyle said that Anurag Kashyap's movies were a key influence when he made Slumdog Millionaire. Some of the chase sequences come from Black Friday, the grittiness from Satya. Then I saw the Sacred Games panel being moderated by Tipu. And you're talking with the showrunner of this huge Netflix series, Vikramaditya Motwand, Varun Grover, the scriptwriter, and of course Vikram Chandra, who wrote the book itself. Then a few weeks back, you were talking to Ramchandra Guha about cricket. He's a famous historian, but is specifically talking about cricket history. And I have been fortunate enough to actually step into your office and see that what you bring to office is all of these facets of you. To me, it looks like you have really found a vocation which matches in with your passion, like very seamlessly. And you have found a way where you go with a very integrated perspective, both at your work and in all of these kind of, for the lack of better word, extracurricular activities. And from a life perspective, that seems to be rooted deep in some of the values that you have.
Yeah, it does. To be honest, I think I've always had a fascination for the things that you said. Let's start with the whole community thing first. We are all immigrants. We are all, as the sci-fi writer Robert Heinlein had said, we are all strangers in a strange land. When I came in here, I knew very few people. I had some classmates. And then, of course, I had the XLRI, the broader XLRI community to fall back on. They had been a great source of help to me. I was very proud of the fact that I went to XLRI. Before that, we went to Presidency College in Calcutta, which is another great place, and JNU in Delhi, again, great colleges. I've always been fortunate in that I managed to somehow make my way into these places. So the alumni network and the connections that one makes are very important for me. And I think the community comes with a little bit of giving back to that, giving back to building those kind of connections for newer people. We always have, and we are fortunate that at XLRI, we've had new alumni come in every year. That keeps us younger. Our average age of the alumni definitely goes down, which is good. You don't want to be the youngest person in these things. You want to have other people who are there who can carry the flag on. So look, what we do in HR is we build a team. We bring people together. We want that mixing to happen because we feel that mixing gives a lot of power. It creates ideas. These little subatomic particles are mixing together. Sometimes it causes a nuclear explosion. Hopefully that's not what it is. But in other cases, it does something good for science, good for humankind. In many ways, that's what it does, which is why I've been very passionate about it. I want to give something back to the Institute. Look, my role is just to set up some meetings and just get people together and say, hey, let's come and make this happen. At the end of the day, you, Anurag, need to make that effort yourself to say that, yeah, I'm going to drop whatever else I'm doing and I'm going to come for this. So that's a personal commitment that you make. In many ways, that's similar to what we do in HR. You are making a personal commitment. Our job is to make sure that the organization and the culture and the systems, processes, the management structure, our compensation system, our learning system, our HRIS, all of these things are creating the right infrastructure and culture for you, the employee, the workers, to be as productive and to bring your own genius to that work. So there's a little bit of kind of bringing it back to what I do for a living versus what I do at other times. The other thing is about arts. I have always been very passionate. I support various Bay Area arts organizations. When I grew up, I grew up in Calcutta. It's a beautiful city. It's a very big city, but at the end of the day, it's a small town relative to the whole world that we have. It's not a place where everybody's coming in and going from. It's a little bit in one corner. You want to be part of this bigger global community. Mm-hmm. And art, in a way, gave me that. When I was little, my father would have all these, he had a wonderful LP collection of Indian and Western classical music. A lot of the, in 1980s, 70s, and 80s India, it was very Russia-centric. So a lot of the LPs that you'd get were Russian LPs from either Moscow or St. Petersburg. Back then, I think it was still Leningrad. And it would be Russian composers, Russian conductors, Russian musicians, not so many of the American ones. I don't recall any RCA or EMI or those labels. It was all of the Russian labels. And of course, Russian musicians were really good and it had a lot of state support. But my point was that it was giving me that exposure into a world outside. Mm-hmm. We all live in our little thing. One of my most favorite movies is a movie by Satyajit Ray. It's called Aparajito, or The Unvanquished, mm-hmm. and it's part of the Apu trilogy. And in that Aparajito is the middle one of the trilogy. This boy, Apu, he is in a little school in a little village, and he's a good student and he works hard. One day the school inspector comes in, and the inspector is very impressed with the boy because he answers a question correctly. The principal brings him over, brings Apurva is his full name, brings him to his room, and he says, look, you have done something really good. You might be living in a small village in India, but you have the capacity to go to the world. He says all this in Bengali, which is my mother tongue. And that's something that's really stuck with me, because here you could be in that thing, but you could go out into the world. To me, arts has provided that avenue. I feel that the way it works for me in HR is, in HR, you cannot be judging. You cannot judge and say, my God, this person is from this country or this background or this education or whatever it is. You cannot make a judgment, because at the end of the day, in HR, it has to be about what they're bringing, what are their abilities, how are you being able to help them. I feel art gives me that empathy. A lot of it is empathy. You have to have empathy and say that there's this whole other thing going on in this person's background, and we have to be aware of that. One of the reasons I like being in the Bay Area is that Bay Area is a melting pot. America is a melting pot. Bay Area especially is a melting pot. We are fortunate to work with all kinds of people from different countries, different communities living in here. In our offices, or well, nowadays no offices, but who are our co-workers. So to be able to appreciate where they come from, it's good to have an idea about what's going on in the world outside you. To me, art and community are all very important for the work that I do as an HR professional.
Right. Thank you. Following up on that, now you have been in the corporate world for more than a couple of decades. What is your perspective on leadership and leading, and what it takes to really develop oneself as a leader?
Let me go back to my arts examples. A lot of art is a very solitary pursuit. You are writing a book, you're composing a piece of music. These are all solitary pursuits. But let's talk about a movie director. Then you are with a big group of people, and you have to get a work of art or get something out of that. I think what you do as a director is very similar to what you do as a leader. You have a group of people with different skills and probably big egos and probably really big, good in their field, or maybe Oscar winners or whatever other award. You could say in a way that they're all very key. You have a cinematographer, you have an art director, you have a editor, you have, of course, the actors and actresses, and they can't do each other's jobs. They're all very, it's very siloed in a way. But you have the music composer, etc. Right? What you do have as a director is you have to manage all of these egos so that you are coming up with a product which is, think of any movie that you like. So you have to come up with that. And at the same time, you have to drive through your artistic vision because you have a certain vision. So how do you communicate your vision to these people who are brilliant in their fields, who probably know more about that one thing than you do? You are a generalist. As a director, you're a generalist. You know a lot about everything. And maybe you have a background. Maybe you used to be a film photographer, cinematographer, who's now become an actor, become a director. So maybe you do have some skills. But normally, you are the person who has to amalgamate all of these visions and drive it towards a way that is meets whatever. When you have a producer, usually someone is producing the movie, and probably the movie needs to do well in the box office. So you have all of these other things, and you're driving it towards that. So to me, a leader is that person. Leader, you are managing all of these egos, and you are able to. So to me, that's what I carry in this story is a leader has to have that boldness of the vision and be able to implement and be able to, because otherwise you have, look, one of my favorite things I look at is the movies which never got made because something happened. It was a great idea, but between the idea and the realization, something happened. And I think in corporate world, there are great product ideas. Not all of them work out because that's where the hard work comes in. That's why movies, as much as a craft as it is an art, to me, being a CEO or a leader or any kind of thing, it's a craft. It's not some kind of a weird magic. There is a lot of hard work involved.
Actually, I had a lot of things firing in my head from the analogy you gave. It's about how leading is a act. The way you described it is a very creative act. It's not just science. There is an art to it. There's a craft involved. You are working with all of these people who bring in their own expertise, and you have to bring them together towards one vision, which is primarily your vision of where you want to take this thing. I really like that. Thank you. This actually made me start to think that from this analogy perspective, how would I differentiate between a manager and a leader? So is it a bad director or a good director? That was one thought that came. The second thought that came is the example you shared about how sometimes you have a very good script, you get the actors and all, but for whatever reason, things fall through. Is that necessarily a sign of not good leadership? Can I correlate that with many startups where people come and fail? So that was the second point. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of just listing these out because I think this analogy has really sparked something. And the final thing that I got was we have very young directors, like when Farhan Akhtar came from an Indian Bollywood perspective, he was able to bring in huge actors like Amir Khan, Saif Ali Khan at that point, Dimple Kapadia, and get them in that Dil Chahta Hai movie. And I can compare that to startups, right? Very young people in their mid-20s leading billion-dollar unicorn companies. What do you say to all this?
So let's look at the first one. Traditionally, a film director in old Hollywood would have started because they didn't have film schools back then. Think of it as your MBA. You did not have an MBA. But before MBA, there were leaders, right? There were business leaders. JP Morgan did not get an MBA, and before did not get an MBA. Whoever else.
Right.
And so what they do is you learn as an apprentice. That's what was happening with a lot of film directors. They're learning as an apprentice. In a way, you could say that they were going through all of this. and they were learning as it was. And anything that you do, any time that you spend behind the camera trying to create something or around as a script guy or a spot boy or whoever, even the guy bringing tea to the set, you are observing, you are learning. So think of it as an internship. What I do a lot of intern recruiting, and what I always tell the intern is, look, you are coming in not because you feel that this is the job that you want to do, but sometimes when you're an intern, definitely was true in my case, I do not know what I want to do. Being an intern helps me to, if nothing else, to say that, okay, this is not what I want to do. It may not tell me what I do want to do, but at least it takes something out. And that itself is something. So in a way, I feel that your manager versus leader question, I feel that what it does is it just, a leader is somebody who's learning from these things and is creating something bigger. A manager is somebody who is your journeyman director. One of the things I love looking at is IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database. You see you see some show and you say, some TV show usually, and it's okay, that looks like an interesting episode. I wonder who made it. And you go and direct and you go and click on the name and I say, oh my God, this guy went on to make all of these. That obviously is somebody who's done it. And sometimes you see, well, this was good, but I do not see the rest of I wish that person went on to make something bigger. And maybe various reasons why it did not happen. Like, coming back to your next question, sometimes it is luck. It is where you are. Just as in corporate, you might be in the market at the exact right time, not because you knew how it's going to play out, but it's just that you got lucky with the way that the cards fell. Similarly, as a creative person, sometimes your funding came through or COVID happened, and then suddenly this topic became really, people got interested in it. And then your whatever book or movie or whatever TV show happened to come out just at that time. So sometimes it's all luck. However much as I think what you and I are talking about is, can we train these things? What can one learn? Can these things be, and sometimes you cannot. Sometimes it's all about the timing, and which kind of brings me to the things that never got made. Look, I came to the US, came to the Valley in 2000, in April of 2000. And the dot-com boom was going on. I was seeing all of these companies, the web vans of the world, and those companies are coming up at that time. Webvan was a customer of ours. And it was a grocery startup. And you never had any of those things then, right? No one was going, who's going to go and order these things more expensive? Today, I mean, my God, just look at how much the kind of money, during the early days of COVID, these things were like, we're like, as I'm probably you were, I was, many other people were, we're like looking for delivery slots so that we can get something. So it's all about luck. I feel that but there is a whole history there. Because Webvan started and Webvan failed, other companies took note and they said, okay, we could do this, which is why you will see sometimes that you might have all of these elements are right, but the timing is not right. Again, this is all common knowledge. I'm not some management guru who's saying these things for the first time. The third thing, which was to do with your Farhan Akhtar question. So one of the points that I will make with the Farhan Akhtars of the world is, of course, they have a certain family connection probably, so it helps them, versus you and I trying to make a movie and trying to ask people to join. But I think what it does also is one of the reasons why people come in is that there's a certain boldness of vision. So one of the directors that I really admire, Orson Welles, and there's a movie based on one of his early works, his most famous work, Citizen Kane, which is playing on Netflix right now. It's a movie called Mank, is based on the life of Herman Mankiewicz, who was the scriptwriter for Citizen Kane. Is widely acknowledged as the best movie ever made. In front of me is my library, and I've got at least, I can see right now, 4 books on Orson Welles. Plus, I think I have all his DVDs. But to me, he's someone that I greatly admire. And then he makes this movie, totally just destroys everything in Hollywood till then, because no one has ever made a movie like that. It gets him into any kinds of enfant terrible. It is difficult to live up to that reputation. When you have a vision like that and you are able to convince people, and that's what a leader does, they're able to, you and I can talk and not get anybody inspired. Well, I won't talk about you, I cannot. But someone like Farhan Akhtar in your example, or Orson Welles in my example, is able to do that. And a good leader is that person who's able to give that. He can, whether he's talking to, doing a Series B funding, or he's going to a campus and doing a info session in a college campus, or he's in a TED talk, whatever. You see them. I'm sure you've seen them in your life, or you've seen recordings of that, right?
Correct. Yeah, I loved how you talked about leaders having a growth mindset. So even when you are joining as an intern, and you gave your example, the idea is to soak in and make something out of it, not just do the task that you are being asked as an intern. And then you wove in the component of luck and timing into it. That really extends well to a startup example as well. You can do everything right. WebVan is a great example of that. So you need to get that piece, and we have no control on that. There are so many other elements that come into the thing. And of course, the key thing that we keep going back to, a few times we have done that so far, is the ability to have a vision, and not just a vision, but a compelling vision that you can then have everybody else gravitate to you, so that you can get it executed upon. That seems to kind of have stood out as one key thing of leadership. I also heard something about having an ecosystem. Like in the Farhan Akhtar example, let's say he was connected, right? Or the WebVan example, people noticed it, and there were people in the ecosystem, maybe the VCs, maybe the private equity, who saw what did not work. And next time on, they were able to pass on those nuggets onward. So I see that how having a robust ecosystem also makes it a very fertile way of seeding new leaders and empowering new leaders in the time to come. I think you answered all the three pieces of the question. So thank you again. And thank you for sharing all of this. One thought that comes to my mind here, actually, before I go to my thought, as I summed it up, does it sound right? Do you want to add anything?
No, you did refer to growth mindsets. That is very important. I did not address it specifically. A few years ago, we had Carol Dweck come into our office, and she spoke to our leaders about her book. So she talked a lot about that. And it's been something which I think, and obviously I did not refer to it, but I didn't directly refer to it, but of course I talked about that in the ideas behind that.
True. And it just gives a very, again, like a compelling framework. And then you can use that common vocabulary when you come inside the organization and you're talking to the people around you. I will shift from the traits of a leader to how can one go about investing in themselves. Are there certain experiences that come up for you from your own journey where you can share about how you invested, how you have seen others invest to become better at this act of leading?
So first off, one thing I have to make it very clear, the caveat is, it's not like I am, my examples may not be very compelling. I am, not, at least in my telling, I'm not a great leader by any stretch. I am barely a leader for that matter. But I think one of the things that I feel I have been very lucky is that I have been able to observe a lot of people in pretty close. I have been fortunate to work in some pretty big companies, good companies, or good leaders, sometimes all of them. We talked about the traits, and I think the things which I have been able to absorb from all of that, I think one is hard work. You cannot escape that. You could also say that in a way, when we were growing up and I joke about this to all my friends, I started working in 96. I finished my MBA in 96 and I joined HCL. At that time, HCL was India's largest, let's say, IT group. I joined on their hardware side. We were selling, they were resellers and they had their own product and they were selling computers and accessories and servers and workstations from HP and Toshiba and Siemens Nietzsdorf, which was this German company, which is not there anymore. So they had all of these products, and they're selling it either directly to the customers or through resellers. They're sending it to large customers, to small and medium enterprises. The things which really helped me, one was, it was a product, it was a tool, it was something you could lift and you could see it. And then for people like me who did not have a lot of work experience, that helped, because the challenge with tools, or challenge with, say, pieces of code, and of course in 96 we did not have that, but the challenge with piece of code is it's not something which is tangible. You do not always understand how the thing works. Now, at this point in my life, yes, of course, I understand how it works. But when you are just starting and you have a certain naivete of organizations, you do not understand. And I think being there, we had a factory. It was an assembly factory. It was not like we were building a computer there, but we were assembling things. It helped me make all the connections between the person on the floor and what is showing up in our store, for example. Computers that time were expensive, so it is being bought by somebody who's probably pretty, at least in the upper middle class, if not more. And for the home, for their children, so that they can learn about computers, whatever it was. I could see connection. To me, that was important. Same here in my company at KLA. KLA makes it makes tools, capital equipment tools for the measurement and inspection of microchips. So it goes into fabs, fabricating units for chips. These go into the measurement and inspection of these, because these are very precision engineering and you cannot have defects. So basically what we do is we try to prevent defects in the process control, in the manufacturing process. And so we build these tools, these giant tools. So for me, when I bring new interns in, or anybody who's coming in, a new hire who's coming in, going into the floor and seeing these things is important. So to me, that part of it is important. And I was fortunate that there's a certain tactile nature to that. And that helps in giving the vision of how, because we all have to understand the vision. Just like a director, movie director, or somebody who's pitching a new company, you have to say that what you are doing and how does that matter and why, where does it show up at the end when you go to the customer. And so that's when I say, okay, I have a phone, my phone works better, it's more faster, et cetera, because the chips they don't fail once they're in the phone, because then that would lead to a recall. It might overheat or those kind of things. So that part is important. I was lucky that I ended in a company like that. Another one is, of course, you have to keep learning from other people and you have to keep educating yourself. I read a lot. I can see my newspapers here on my table. I read the Wall Street Journal. I should read it clean up my table.
You're the old world guy, reading it in.
I love reading papers, yeah. I subscribe to our local San Jose Mercury News, Wall Street Journal. Then online, I have the New York Times and the Guardian. I get magazines, Business Week, Economist. I have New Yorker online subscription. But to me, and I won't pretend that I get to read all of these. I wish I could. But to me, I think reading at least one newspaper a day is very important, because we are in HR, and my advice might have been different for someone else, but in HR, a lot of what we do is the society around us. We are hiring people from that society. It's the same thing I mentioned earlier about movies. We are hiring people from that society. We have to know what's going on in that society. We have to know, are my employees having maybe there's something a couple of weeks back, Nagorno-Karabakh in the Armenian border and Azerbaijan and Armenian border. That was a pretty big conflagration. And that's been something I remember it from when I was in college. It's been going on for many years. Now, when I was in India, it didn't really matter. It's not like I knew anybody from Armenia or Azerbaijan that it would be an issue. But now, of course, we have employees in our company who have Armenian heritage. And it's not that I'm going to go and ask them about these things, but it's good for me to know some of these things. Where are people coming from? The other way that it really helps you is what other industries are prospering and doing well. How's COVID impacting other things? Because I am always paranoid that our people are going to leave and go somewhere else, which I think every HR person probably is paranoid about, if not others. So for me, it's good to know what's going on in other industries and something that we learn. and something that I can pick up from, wow, so this is like, it sounds like a really good practice that some other company is doing. Maybe I should do something like that for my company. These are things that you have to keep updating yourself. And I'm not saying updating in terms of the HR world, because that can be very narrow, but updating in terms of what is the wider socio-political world, the wider business world. One of the great articles that I was just reading last night in the Business Week, the new edition of the Business Week, which is now Bloomberg Business Week, was on companies which have people who are now, because of COVID, are moving out of the headquarter location and working in various, smaller satellite locations, especially people like me who are not really in the office in that way. We are not part of, say, building the tool or the product. The article is about what is the tax implications of that, and what is many companies are reducing salaries because they are moving away. Those kind of things to me was like, wow, I read that and I said, okay, I'm glad that our company seems to be more sophisticated than the examples they had in that story. I think Redfin, that real estate company, was one of the examples. It's good to see that our company is doing well and some new ideas. And I'm saying, I must send this over to my boss, our head of HR, and to our head of Comp and Ben, because there's some good stuff in there. To me, that was important because it helps me build a relationship, and it's somebody who's at least keeping up with what's going on in the world. For any young, aspiring HR person, that is important. These kind of things is what really differentiates you.
The one thing that struck out to me is you take it for granted that you have to be good at what you are doing at your job, because that's like a given. You have to be good at what you're doing. Over and above that, the first point that came out is you have to work hard. You qualified that by saying working hard, what could it mean? And then you translated how it finally boils down to, why does your work matter? And you, in your case, were able to break it down with a very tangible product, understanding how the product starts and how does it get to the factory, what comes out, how customers use it, and relate it to the work that you were doing. I think the why is something, knowing your why for your work seems to be very important. The second thing I noted is the fact that this is not a one-step process. This is a continuous process. You have to continue to educate yourself. You have your newspapers and magazine subscriptions. Somebody else might be going to seminars, meetings, etc. You have found what works for you, and you are invested in that on a daily basis. Newspaper comes in daily. You are looking at it. You are sharing it around with your peers to make sure the right ideas come through. You get a chance to benchmark. You also get a chance to see what the competition is doing and get some ideas inside as well. In my perspective, essentially what you're doing is keeping an ear to the ground, having a pulse of your people, because especially in your role, it's all about people, knowing what's happening in the business world, what's happening in the social world, what is happening from a regulatory standpoint. All of these themes become important. These were the three big things. Did I miss anything? Would you like to add anything to that?
And one thing which is connecting all of these things is curiosity.
Oh.
I think it is really important to have that curiosity. One of the things, and you and I have probably gone through a similar education system, there's this thing about, is it in the syllabus or not in the syllabus?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is a very, very problematic thing, because the moment you're talking about the syllabus, you're talking about boundaries. And I'm saying, I need to learn this. I don't need to learn outside of this.
Right.
This thing is very arbitrary. And it was based by some syllabus committee who said that, all right, kids of this age and maybe this maturity, maybe let's not overburden them. Let's just keep it like this. To be curious is when you have to go outside of this. And I feel that in HR, sometimes we'll say, okay, this is not my company. It doesn't matter. This is about retail and I'm in manufacturing. It doesn't, or high tech or something else. It doesn't really matter. Everything matters. At the end of the day, tomorrow you'll be hiring people who've got some experience in retail to your company also. So it's good to know that. I feel that lack of curiosity is sometimes maybe stifling you a little bit. In a way, it's similar to art. And you have to have the curiosity to say, maybe I like thrillers as a genre. But I'm interested in knowing about, I want to know about some comedy also, because, and of course, if you're watching a Bollywood movie, it's got everything. But normally in other kind of movies, they're two separate genres. So in a way, you have to be open. You have to be eclectic.
I see people spending most of their day and evenings executing on what they need to do at their jobs. They have no other time to invest in their development. From your experiences, maybe your personal experiences, or people that you have seen develop themselves, invest in themselves, are there some examples that jump out to you that people can follow, especially people who feel that they are too busy getting the work done?
A couple of things. One is, I completely agree with you. To be good at your job, you have to invest. Right? I mentioned earlier about working hard. Yes, I mean, that part is needs to be done. The problem then becomes is that if you become really good at your job, then you'll only end up doing that kind of a job. Because what happens is, A, you are comfortable, and B, your manager probably thinks that, okay, this Anurag is really good at SAP, and I'm just going to make Anurag. Tomorrow we're going to be implementing Workday, but Anurag seems to have a good knack for these system implementation type of things, so I'll give him that. Think of it also like an actor. Like, you become an actor, you become Sean Connery, and you're good at James Bond, so all the roles I'm giving you are like James Bond. Right? And that's, I know in real life for Sean Connery, that was a big problem. So I think for us, it is good for us to be, when I say curious, it also is, you have to expand your boundaries. You may be really good at this, but you cannot say this is all that I want to do. I can understand why it can be comforting. That's something where you know that this is something I can eat off for the rest of my life. We all need to make a living. We all need to put food on the table for us or our family members. To your point, you have to do that experimentation yourself. One of my favorite authors, Graham Greene, is this British writer from the 40s, 50s, died in the 90s, if I recall. He used to write these stories. One of them would be a very deep philosophical novel and about some very high concept. There's movies about Catholicism, about guilt, not movies, books. But then he'd be also churning out these thrillers. The way it was like one for me, one for you. The reason was that you want to be eclectic and you want to be able to change your pace. Now, again, not very different example, but if you feel that you are spending all your time on doing this, you have to either look for another job, or you feel that you need to branch out into other things. I had to do that. Many people end up doing that because they get too typecast. And unlike actors, we are not here for our looks. So we can do other things. But I feel that the many hiring managers will say that, oh no, I only want somebody who's done all of these things. And to me, that is very problematic. And we have, because of diversity and inclusion efforts today in the country, I think US, and I'll talk in the US context just because it's probably more relevant today in the US and more prevalent, you are asking managers to experiment, and you're telling them, don't hire the next engineer that you hire doesn't need to be from Stanford and doesn't need to have so much of grades and doesn't need to have worked in a FANG company. It shouldn't be like that. Start looking outside, because if you could only look at those things, then you only get one kind of candidates. And you have to, and I'm glad that inclusion and diversity has made these things more out front, is because now you are telling them, go and find other kind of people. We are going to, we as a company also, I think, most companies today will publish these kind of data. Also, they have other reasons to do that. To me, it's a good thing. Whatever maybe your motivation, maybe you just want to look good. It's a form of virtue signaling, whatever it is. In a way, it tells you to go outside and look for something different.
Yeah. Thank you. The onus is on the individual when it comes to investing. They have to recognize what they want and whether they are able to do that. Some people would be very comfortable doing one job for the rest of their life because that's giving them an honest paycheck and they're happy with it. But most of us would want to expand our boundaries. And that effort has to come from the person itself. If our current job does not allow that, then maybe we need to look at other avenues. what you mentioned from the diversity and inclusion standpoint is maybe the workplace of today is more open to that than before because the focus is more on capability and skill and not necessarily your background.
One other quick point I want to make is I talked a lot about books and you mentioned webinars and seminars. Those are very important too. I'm not a big webinar and seminar person, but if that's what gives you, you're able to absorb things from, then that's awesome. Whatever it is, do something to keep yourself educated and learn a little bit more outside of what happens in your company, whatever the medium is.
Even though you're based in Silicon Valley, Bay Area here, you do work in a global company with international offices. I was curious when we look through, or when we look at leadership and leading, are there certain cultural nuances that come in where how people invest in themselves or when it comes to leading diverse teams that you have picked up over the years?
Yeah. So first off, I'm very fortunate. My boss, our head of HR, John Van Camp, our head of Sandra Mahadwar, who's our senior VP of organization in HR, who has been in this role before I did. They have all been very open, and both of them have very strong in their practices. They have made sure that our policies are not US policies, and it has to be something that works globally. I'll go back to my favorite examples, movies. When you make movies, you try to make movies that are appealing to, because in a very strictly commercial sense, you want the movie to make money everywhere in the world and not just in the US. And just like in the world of movies, now you get more money outside of the US than US. In our company, even though we are a Valley-based company, we are headquartered in the Silicon Valley, we have more employees outside of the US, even in the US outside of Milpitas, than we have in Milpitas. Our CEO, Rick Wallace, and his staff, they've all been very open to this whole thing about there's a world outside. So to me, it was not like I had to convince people, so that was good. And we talked about behavior modeling earlier, where you learn from other people. I really learned a lot from all of these people in terms of what I am, how we do operate as a company. To me, it was an easy act to follow. I'm fortunate. If I did not have that kind of an environment, it may have been different. But then again, if we did not have that kind of an environment, we probably would not have been doing in this business, because it's hard to be in this semiconductor business and be very US focused. Because a lot of semiconductor manufacturing and consumption happens in Asia. The things that I do myself on the leadership front, one is you have to have a good ear for cultural differences. And this is a bit of a double-edged sword. It's very easy to reduce cultural differences to some kind of a meme. Culture is a very complex thing. I'm not an expert. The only culture I know very well inside out is from the culture of Bengal, the place that I've been born. Even then, there are many cultures, nuances between classes and stuff that you see in India that I'm not aware of. So one should not pretend that one knows about it and try to pander. I think you have to say that, look, this is our company culture, which is why the company culture becomes very important. You have to have a strong company culture. And then after that, this is the way that it works in Japan, because I'm very involved in our Japan office nowadays for other reasons. And I need to find out how this will work in Japan because of this insular, strong culture that Japan has. So understanding those nuances is important, and which is why there's a tendency towards shorthand. You have to really insert yourself, dig deep into it. A challenge today is because of lack of traveling, because to me, I need to be there. I need to see how they're working, and when I say how they're working, not from I don't trust what you're doing, but more from an appreciation of that other person. Coming back to my own practice, I try to make things as easier for the other teams, which is why I will have meetings, my one-on-one meetings or my team meetings, like my staff meetings. I have 11 people, I think, director, of whom only one person is here in Milpitas, and another person is outside of in Ann Arbor, where we have a pretty big office. Everyone else is outside of the US.
Wow.
So the only time that I have where I can get everybody, I start my meeting at 11 p.m. and it goes on till about 1 a.m. But to me, I don't expect the Ann Arbor person to come in because their timing is not going to work. But to me, it is very important to have everyone else be at a time where it is good for them, because they have to make many sacrifices, because a lot of our functions are, our headquarter functions are in Milpitas. It's not on them. So that sacrifice needs to come from me and our US teams, which is not too many people. So I feel, so that kind of things, you have to show that, look, we understand, I don't pretend to be an expert in Korean labor laws, but I have faith that you do, and I am going to be able to understand what you are telling me without being an expert myself. And I say, this is how it works in Korea. I'll say, okay, that sounds logical. I might ask some of the right questions and say, okay, tell me, why is this happening? And maybe do some investigation on my own just to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding, or I may be very slow to understand certain things and I may need a little bit more, so I ask for some other help. But to your point, how does one manage diverse team? One has to make those sacrifices because time zone is a big problem.
One of the things that I think you mentioned early on is how fortunate you were to get the good mentors. And for you, you got mentors within your organization, within your HR function itself. Not everybody would be that lucky, but having the right mentors makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
The other thing that I picked up, and I think you emphasized earlier, is keeping an ear to the ground and having the willingness to model your behavior accordingly. And I think the third piece, which kind of really stood out for me, is you're saying that, yes, we understand the culture is different for every country. Even there could be microcultures within countries. However, it is very important for the organization to have an identity of its own, to know what it stands for. If the organization knows itself, then you have to work at adapting to different cultures. If you blindly try to adapt to every culture, then you are just reducing yourself to the mean, which is not good for anyone.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that was an aha moment for me, because now that I have heard you articulate it, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, the corporate culture is the one thing that you're in control of. You cannot control the culture of the country that you're operating in. That's Japan. Using Japan, but could be anybody. These are like 1,000-year-old civilizations. So what am I going to do there trying to change that? What I can control is my culture and my company culture. Hire those kind of people who I feel follow my culture, believe in my culture. And then in various ways, without conflicting your national culture. And I'm sure you're familiar with Hofstede's work and on culture. And it's a very seminal work, and that really gives you a good place to start from.
Yeah, and in a sense, it goes back to having that curiosity, because you can go to different countries, but if you're not curious, you will still be eating the same. You'll be trying to find the McDonald's, right? You're not even sure. Yeah.
That's an important thing, and that's so. If I might take one quick digression, and I travel with my boss to many of these places, not everywhere, and I just marvel as to how good he is. It's like he's at home anywhere. He's in Chennai and he'll eat a dosa, and he's in Singapore at their Hawker's Corner, and he's like having the food from there. I'm just amazed as to how good he is. I don't have as broad a palate for food as he does, but I try to do it in my own way, like public transport. I always use public transport. Even now in my wallet, I just saw the other day that I have my
Japan train pass.
Japan or China. I think it was my China Metro pass. And I haven't been to Japan and China in now a year, but to me, it was good for me to have that, because I felt that it is giving me without doing these things, you have to know how people are living. Otherwise, I can just do this in a way that I am just flying in and flying out. And I was fortunate when I was in HCL that I could travel to many of the cities in India. And I always used to stay with friends, and being from, we have a shared college connection. So, there's a lot of our classmates who are everywhere. And I could stay with them, and it gave me a really good understanding of how, these if I'm an employee and I'm working in Bombay, staying in a hotel, everything looks great. I can stay in a hotel and take a cab. But if I stay in somebody's house and I'm taking a train to the office, I can get a much better appreciation of what they are going through. So, anyway.
Right. And I think the same is true if you have an office in Beijing versus having an office in Shenzhen, because the cultures are different. We cannot put it in one bracket and say, oh, this is how China works.
Right. Thank you for putting it that way. Yes. Yeah. And that's what I was mentioning. It's very easy to make it a meme.
We cannot ignore the fact that we are living in very unprecedented time. Some people are comparing 2020 or the impact of the pandemic to how the world wars changed the world. Just focusing on the work perspective and on leadership itself and the task of leading, from your vantage point, what is something new that is emerging and what is something that is going away?
One of the things that I see is in the US, we have been a little bit shy of getting too much into an employee's personal life and what's happening at home. As a culture, now I might ask you, how are you? And hey, how are things? But I know you well enough that you could tell me that, yeah, I know, still some challenges and whatever. If I don't know you that well, I'm not going to answer that. I'll just say, hey, you're good. And you've probably seen that happen in offices. I see much more of an involvement and engagement with the life outside of work. I see our CEO, Rick Wallace, he has about monthly, sometimes weekly, depending on what's going on. He has a video that he now does. He never did it before. I love the way in the video he addresses things that are concerning him, things that he's asking about other people, the message he's giving his direct staff, other managers in the organization. This thing was not happening before. Because, like everyone else, you're traveling a lot, so you feel that you're in touch with people. You have a good idea of what's going on. My boss asked me, I'm a business partner, so I work with multiple leaders. They ask what is going on. I remember one time I was talking to our head of sales and service, Brian, and my son had a doctor's appointment, and suddenly there was a little bit of freak out happening at home. So I had to tell him, look, I have to hang up now. I need to, I'll get back to you. I'll just call you back. This is an EVP in the organization, so you have a finite amount of time. And in that half hour when I was talking, then this little meltdown happens. Right. We can't help it. That's how it is. So anyway, so I get back to him, and he asks about is everything okay? You're going to be able to work, right? It's not like that in a very transactional way. It's really in a much more of, hey, how's it going? I know it's hard. What are you doing? What kind of, do you want me to talk to your boss? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'll take care of that. Thank you for. I think that kind of solicitousness was not, it was there, but it was not so overt. Everybody has now become much more conscious of the fact that it's not business as usual. There's a lot of things that you're doing differently than you were doing before, and one needs to be aware of that. I hope it continues even when things come back. I think there's a certain amount of awareness and appreciation for work-life balance. Like every other company, we were also like, yeah, work-life balance, that's a choice. It is not. And I think that has probably changed. So that's one thing which I think is a positive thing. Another thing that I see when it comes to leadership is when you are meeting every day, you become a little bit unorganized. Unorganized in thought, because, and maybe I'm talking about myself, but I think that's true for some other people too. You feel that, yeah, I'm going to meet all of them, so we'll hash it out. Meet in a room. We will be in a conference room, we'll figure it out. And you realize that a lot of it is not all about hashing it out, because you may not have the time. So that pre-work is important. So let me go back to another example from the movie side, like Satyajit Ray, who is this well-known Bengali director from my college and my city, and a big fan of his. One of the things that you do in movies, because you don't always have the time, because movie time is important, right? Because paying them for that. Film is expensive because you're paying for the film. So you cannot shoot an hour of film and then decide I'm going to use only 20 minutes of it. if you are, money is not a problem, that probably is okay. But in the kind of movies that Ray was making, they didn't have all of that money. So you do storyboarding was huge. So you put storyboard on everything so that when you're finally getting, it's almost like you're editing the movie in the camera. You're not editing a 5-hour movie into a 2-hour movie. What you're shooting is really what you need. Now, that's something which is born out of scarcity. And today, I feel that in the world in corporate world, where you do not have the luxury of just spending infinite amount of time with each other and getting things done and finding a way forward, I think organizing yourself, your thoughts, your ideas, doing the pre-work so that you can, when you're actually meeting, one advantage of pre-work is you can do it at your own time. You can do it after the kids go to sleep. You can do it before the kids wake up. You can do it when the kids have a break, or not kids, whatever else you have, other life stuff going on. So I feel that then when you're meeting, finally, it's a short meeting and you're able to get things done where you have everybody's done their stuff. Between that and the new collaboration tools that we have between Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever, I think we didn't have these things like in the other kinds of crisis. So for managers, there is many more things that they can do, and leaders have to model these kind of things. Leaders have to model that behavior. The example like I was just giving you in my company, and I've seen it in many other companies. I've seen I think, Twitter, I was very impressed with what Jack Dorsey was doing on some of these societal issues of the day. And in the Valley, it's mostly people who are working in tech jobs, and between their stock options and everything, they're well provided for, many of them, not all. But in the East Bay, where Oakland is, it's not the case. And the digital divide becomes a pretty big thing. I mean, Oakland, for those who are not in the Bay Area, is a poorer district. It's largely African-American because everybody's working from home. Not everyone has the high-speed internet connection or devices to connect on it. So he's giving his own money to the school district to bridge that digital divide. These kind of things to me are very inspiring because I feel that as a leader, you are able to really put your money where you feel that some of these problems are. He's not expecting that this person is going to use Twitter or Square as a payment tool. We all human beings, we all want to know the world is a better place, and we are trying to make the world a better place. In these times, those things are important. As a leader, you have to have those things that you are passionate about, and you have to model the kind of behavior that you want.
In your role, at one end, you are talking to college graduates and pitching them to join the organization or onboarding them. The focus that you have in developing them versus people who have been in the organization 20 years and who are still part of the organization, who are still growing. Are there certain areas or certain tools/techniques or certain approaches that you have seen work that you could recommend?
So first off, I'll say that it takes a village to grow, to develop somebody. Sometimes you have people in your organization who can help you. Sometimes you have to go outside. A couple of things we do as a company in KLA. We are members of Women Unlimited, which is a advocacy group and a leadership development group for, as the name suggests, for women. We cycle a lot of our women leaders through this program. They have a very well-developed program. I've had people from my team who's gone through that, and they've come back much more enhanced in their roles and their skills. I think a big thing for groups, and by groups I say women leaders, women in the organization, African Americans, or what we call underrepresented minorities, Latinos in the tech world, in our very Silicon Valley tech world, which are underrepresented for new college grads. It's good to have a cohort. Now that cohort can be inside or outside of the organization. Usually when you're hiring a lot of, like we hire a lot of college grads, you get a cohort inside.
Right.
We don't have that many women leaders. We don't have that many African American or Latino workers, Latinx workers. So for those employees, they may need to look outside for that kind of cohort and that support. I think as a company, you can sponsor those things, you can support them financially. If you have affinity groups that you can create within your organization, that's great, because people learn from each other. People, I mean, humans are social animals. They learn from doing things. And early on in our thing, I was talking about community, like for our XLRI alumni. To me, that network and community is important. You have to find a community to create in some way. It's a little bit different when you are, like you gave the example of 20-year veterans in the company, and not necessarily 20 years, but even earlier, where you feel that maybe you do not have anybody in the organization who can be a mentor or who can give that kind of direction. I think coaches are important. I think coaching is very important. Coaching can do a couple of different things. One is, of course, coaching can be a sign that of the management that they have confidence in that person. They're spending time on that person's development and spending money, obviously, on that person's development, because when you're being coached, you're taking time away from work. It also, a good coach is able to open their eyes to various other experiences that they may not have. Sometimes the coach is doing that based on their life experience or their work experience. But I don't think one is hiring a coach because that person has done all of these things before. Sometimes what the coach does is they open their eyes to other things. I think that part of it is because you are, as a coach, you're working on with what that person has. Like, I cannot read music or write music, so you cannot make me a musician. What you can do is maybe you can help me appreciate music in a different way than I do. That's what the coach is able to do. And I'm a big cricket fan. The best coaches are not the best cricketers. The best coaches are people who have a certain experience, but more importantly, they are able to translate whatever experience they have had in a way that the player in their charge is able to get mentally more focused. Maybe they're able to get their front foot defense a little bit stronger. Maybe they're able to play the swinging ball. A lot of these things when we were in Australia last week and we were all out for 36 at Adelaide would have helped. And of course, that time I felt that I could have done a better job. But for a brief moment, my God, that was so bad. So, but I think what a coach does is those kind of things. And I think you have to look outside because you may not have those coaches in the organization. And sometimes it's always better, even if you have those coaches in the organization. So there's a difference between a mentor and a coach, where a mentor can give you a little bit because they're more organizational insight and organizational view and organizational connections. A mentor can be your sponsor. Those kind of things are important from an organizational politics point of view. You need to have somebody who's looking for you, looking after you. But a coach is a little bit different because what a coach is doing is, in this case, he's a safe person. I can go and talk to the coach because I can go and talk to the coach about a lot of different things. The coach is not making notes and calling me after that and said, guess what he just said. No, that's not what it is. So that's why I think it's a safe spot. And I think we all want, and I think we do that. I know I do that with some friends, and I say, oh my God, that sucked. That whole thing sucked. And I can't believe that this person did that. We all do that, right? In a way, and sometimes that's good because you have to get it out of the system. But with a coach, you can go and get into the bigger picture. What the coach really helps you thinking is, if you're going through 10 meetings and in 8 of them you're saying that sucked, what is yes, I can understand it sucked, but what is the bigger theme there?
Right.
So that's where I think the coach is really helpful. And it's better to do that outside of the organization where there is no conflict of interest.
I have one more question, and this is the last question from my side. What recommendations you have for movies for people?
This is a hard one because, movies is something very personal. So I love watching, my wife keeps saying black and white subtitled Romanian movies. But I love watching those too. Actually, Romanian cinema is very powerful, and in this millennium, Romanian cinema has really made some great movies. But let me not go too much into that. I have not been able to convince my wife and kids to watch movies that I like.
Mhm.
My wife keeps saying that, before we got married and we are, trying to impress each other, I'd watch her movies, she would watch my movies. After we got married years ago, we stopped doing that. I think it lasted for about a year or two, and then we figured that we don't like each other's movie choices. One movie that we both like, and I have to say even my kids like, and that has gone through generations, and actually looking for it around to see if I have it around me. I don't think I do, or I have it somewhere I can't locate right now, is the Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
The New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was probably not that good, but to me, Empire Strikes Back is an excellent movie. I think there's a lot of life lessons that Yoda is teaching you, which can be used in a corporate setting. The whole Jedi and Padawan concept is the master and apprentice, like we were talking about earlier. Another thing is, because it is unusual times, I have tried to stay away from watching Netflix. I haven't watched anything on Netflix or Amazon Prime or things, because to me, I want this to be a little bit of a different experience. I can watch Netflix when the world is back to normal. I can watch Amazon Prime when the world is back to normal. What I like to do now is watch things which are different, things I don't get. So the Metropolitan Opera has streams a new opera every day. Now they're starting to repeat because they didn't also think it was going to last till now. But in a way, an opera is something which I'm a lot into classical music, as mentioning earlier. An opera is not something that I have been into. My father loves it. In a way, I realize that it's a way for me to talk to my father about a shared passion, because I'm getting into it and I know enough of classical music so I can appreciate some of the points of opera. Not all. This, for example, is a name of Wagner's Richard Wagner, who's this very well-known German opera composer, and this is one of his very famous operas. It means the Twilight of the Gods, Götterdämmerung. It's, in a way, it's a funny thing, obviously, because we said little question marks at the end. But in a way, opera is something which is a passion, because I feel that I can get into something more. This is a bit of a growing experience for me, and I'm able to move into something new, develop myself, grow into something bigger. And it is not for me the same more, okay, what's going on in Netflix? What are all my other buddies watching on Netflix? Let's all watch Queen's Gambit and let's all watch Tiger King. It's more than that, because I feel that I'm just going to go crazy otherwise. So to me, it is like going and hunting out all these. And one advantage of this pandemic has been there is so much of content that is being put out there. Like I watched something on Marie Curie, play on the life of Marie Curie, the French-Polish inventor of radium and X-rays and everything. My mother is a big fan of Marie Curie, and my mother is a physicist and she has a PhD. And for my mother, Marie Curie is is an idol, because at that time, we are talking about the 1960s, you did not have PhDs that you could look up to, female scientists that you could look up to. To me, that play and the way that you could see some of these things and sharing it with my mother, I bought it for her and she was able to watch it in India, which is great. It was a show by a East Coast-based company, theater troupe. And, like everyone else now, they're putting stuff online. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal and I said, oh, this is something my mother would really like. I sent it to her and she loved it. That to me was, you have to make all of these connections now, because like everyone else, I'm sitting here, I'm not able to go to India and see my parents. These kind of shared connections, and you asked about what we do in companies, you have to build those shared connections. What is it? Because you're not doing office parties anymore. How are you getting some of these shared connections? What are you able to do for people to still say that I am not one person sitting in a room in another city who no one knows and no one is able to understand my life and what's going on with me. We have to have that empathy to understand what's going on in other people's life. Finding those shared connections are important. So what you are doing, these kind of things, that helping people to have that shared connections, they're seeing that you are building your own community, which we all are, and we hope we continue to do that.
I would, though, continuing the question, make a request that you drop me a note with your top 10, and I will post it along with the video on the YouTube channel.
Sure. I will.
Thank you. This was not just educational, insightful, but I think it was wonderfully entertaining conversation as well, because of all of the connections that you showed me, how the movie world and how we work as corporates, how we work as leaders. You kind of brought it all together in some way. Thank you, Tipu. This has been excellent.
Thanks, Anurag. I appreciate your asking the questions and sitting through my answers, which I know are very long.
Oh, absolutely. There is a lot of curiosity and gratitude and kind of a earnestness in which you talk about things. I hope it comes through to the people who are watching this as well.
Thank you, Anurag. Gratitude is important. We are in that season of gratitude. So,
Merry Christmas and have a great start to the new year.